Thanks so much for everyone joining us today, and welcome to the first webinar of 2026 for the HHS Center for Faith. We're so glad you've joined us. My name is Ben Odell, and I serve as a senior advisor here in the center. And today we'll serve as the moderator for the webinar titled Faithful Connection, Stronger Futures: How Faith Communities Can Prevent Human Trafficking. We're honored to be co-hosting this webinar with the Office of Trafficking in Persons, which is within the Administration for Children and Families here in HHS. And we're so glad to be partnering with them around this webinar and all around future efforts that will build connections and relationships between faith and communities, and it work to address and prevent human trafficking. So thank you so much for their partnership and for them joining us here today. We'll be joined by key leaders from each of those offices who are going to share a little bit about the administration's leadership on this front. And then we'll also be hearing from community-based leaders, faith leaders from around the country who are doing amazing work in the community, so you can catch a vision of what this looks like for yourself in your local community and see how you can be part of this month as National Human Trafficking Prevention Month in the month of January. So we're so glad to hear from all those different voices. All this is happening, as I mentioned. January is National Human Trafficking Prevention Month, and during this month, we join with President Trump in renewing our commitment to end the evil of human trafficking, protecting the innocent among us, and ensuring that every trafficker faces the justice they deserve. So, without any further ado, it's my honor to bring into this conversation Monty Burks, who serves as the director for the HHS Center for Faith, who will introduce himself and talk a little bit about our next speaker, but also share about the commitment this administration and HHS has to including faith and community-based leaders in the work to address human trafficking. So, Monty, over to you, and leave it to you to introduce our next speaker as well.
Absolutely, Ben, and thank you so much for the great introduction and the wonderful words. My name is Monty Burks. I'm honored to open this conversation as the director of our office and as a man of faith who believes houses of worship have a unique and urgent role to play in protecting the vulnerable. Scripture tells us to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves and defend the rights of the poor and needy. Human trafficking is a direct violation of that call. It strips people of dignity and thrives where vulnerability goes unseen. Trafficking is often misunderstood as something distant or rare, but in reality, it's happening in our cities, in our rural communities, and sometimes just beyond the doors of our sanctuaries and houses of worship, hidden in plain sight. It flourishes where there is poverty, addiction, homelessness, broken families, and yes, isolation. And that is exactly where our houses of worship already are by definition. Faith communities are often the first to encounter vulnerability and the last to walk away. You all serve individuals and families navigating hunger, recovery, incarceration, and long intertwined, interconnected traumas. You are trusted, present, and uniquely positioned to notice when something isn't right and to respond before harm occurs. For me, this work is personal. I know what it means to be vulnerable and to walk through systems where dignity can be lost and exploitation can take root. I also know the life-changing power of faith, community, and someone willing to intervene earlier. That lived experience is why I believe that prevention is possible and why our houses of worship are the infrastructure that matters in this fight. Today's conversation is grounded in the call to love our neighbor and defend the oppressed. This is sacred work we can stand in together. Prevention is not about turning houses of worship into law enforcement agencies. It's about awareness, discernment, and obedience. It's about equipping congregations to recognize warning signs, respond wisely, and connect people to real help. The gatekeeper can connect someone to a lifelong vulnerable resource. Today's webinar is an invitation to lean in and to learn and to, yes, act, to move from concern to calling, to become informed partners in building communities where exploitation has no place to hide. Let us commit not only to learning today, but to leaving prepared to do something, to educate our congregations, to train our volunteers, and to partner with those on the front lines. Let us pray that God would open our eyes to see, our hearts to respond, and our hands to protect. May we be light where darkness seeks to hide, and may our faith be known by how we defend the vulnerable. This week, I got to spend a little bit of time meeting a new friend and colleague. His name is Kevin Malone. Kevin and I talked about the work that we've done over the years and how important it is for our houses of worship, our congregations, our front lines, our deacons, our first ladies, anyone in our houses of worship to be involved in something that sometimes they don't even know it's a fight happening in their own backyard. I'm thankful to spend time with Kevin and know that Kevin and I are going to fellowship outside of this webinar because we see the synergy in the work that we do. So I would like to introduce my friend from the Office of Trafficking Persons, Kevin Malone. Kevin, I'll let you take it from here, my friend.
Thank you, Dr. Monty. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be on with you and Ben and all of the folks that are on this webinar today. It's humbling as we answer the call from God to fight for the vulnerable. And I'm just grateful to be a part of this. And I look forward to getting to know other people that are on this call. Human trafficking, as we know, is a horrific evil and crime and a public health issue. It affects individuals, families, and communities across the United States. And no single sector can address it alone. We have to work together. We have to collaborate. We have to partner. Faith communities have been among the first to step up, offering practical help, trusted relationships, and a steady presence when people are in crisis. That leadership matters now more than ever. My faith guides me. My relationship with Jesus Christ compels me because it reminds me that my faith isn't only what we believe, it's what we do. And the book of James tells us that faith is made real through action. It says, to quote, "Be doers of the word and not hearers only." I've seen what faith communities can do when we focus our attention and show up. It reveals Abba, our Father. It puts his love, his mercy, and grace on display. Communities of faith can offer connection, healing, and a genuine sense of purpose. Local leaders can bring people together, raise awareness about the evils that exist within our neighborhoods, and they build systems of support that help people find support sooner. No matter what your faith tradition is, many of our communities share common values, dignity, compassion, and the responsibility to care for one another. This is a shared mission rooted in the call to protect the most vulnerable among us. We also know that for many people who are being exploited or those who are at risk, faith spaces, churches, and synagogues are where they look for hope and guidance. They may come to a faith leader before they talk to law enforcement, before they disclose to family, or even before they have words for really what's happening to them. When they do, they deserve to be met with care, not judgment, and to be connected to safe, informed help. As you guys know, and as Dr. Monty mentioned, January is the National Trafficking Prevention Month. What we're talking about today is a reminder that supportive relationships at home, at work, and in our communities can help protect people from trafficking and other forms of abuse. Today, I'm honored to be at HHS as the Senior Advisor on Human Trafficking, and I'm thankful for the opportunity from President Trump and Susie Wiles. And I work through the Administration of Children and Families with Catherine Chong and her team at OTIP. They do amazing work, and we're helping to coordinate efforts across the government so our work is better connected and more effective. That means aligning priorities, sharing what we're learning, and making it easier for partners on the ground to work together. And that includes you, faith leaders, and faith communities. There are many practical ways faith communities can help prevent human trafficking and support people who have been harmed. First, learn and share accurate information, including the root causes of trafficking, things like isolation, unstable housing, poverty, and lack of support. It's also important to understand that trafficking is not only something that happens somewhere else. It's happening, as Dr. Monty said, it's happening in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our cities and towns all across the United States. Prevention starts with strong, connected communities. Second, talk about it in a thoughtful, age-appropriate way. Silence and stigma make it harder for people to ask for help. Faith communities can help by creating spaces where people can ask questions, they can learn, and they can seek help without shame. Third, use your voice to support policies and practices that reduce vulnerability and strengthen families. And most importantly, let's support survivors. They need our support. Oftentimes we talk about law enforcement and they do a great job in going after the predators, and we need them to do that, but we need to support our survivors. And there's lots of different ways we can do that. Faith communities can offer care that is steady and compassionate, showing up, listening, respecting choices, and helping people connect to safe, trauma-informed services. Many faith traditions also value prayer and reflection. Prayer can be a meaningful way to show solidarity and safety. I spoke with a father of a survivor down in Texas who said what helped him the most wasn't a program, it was people. It was a few friends who stayed close. They checked in and they didn't disappear on him. His daughter had gone through a tremendous ordeal and was trafficked in the city of Houston. And he said the community, his friends, they made the real difference. Faith communities can also partner with local anti-trafficking organizations and with other faith communities to build community resilience. You can help provide or connect people to wraparound supports, safe housing, healthcare, counseling, trauma recovery, legal help, and job readiness programs based on what that person wants and that person needs. Your involvement matters. Strong relationships and supporting families reduce the vulnerabilities that traffickers exploit. The mission is clear, and faith communities should lead the way. I was blessed and honored to do a 5-episode series with Pastor Francis Chan a few years ago called the Advocate Series, Defending Hope for the Hopeless, because we realize that every human being is made in the image of God. We're called to be the salt of the earth. In other words, make it a better place. We're called to do good works. We are to advocate for those that feel hopeless. My brothers and sisters, we are faced with an evil most people feel is insurmountable, but we are supernaturally equipped by God, by Jesus, for this purpose, and we can bring light into darkness. For we know, as it says in Ephesians 2:10, for we are God's handiwork, his masterpiece. We were created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. God bless each and every one of you for fighting the good fight of faith. I know with Ben and with Dr. Monty and myself and Catherine Chong and the OTIP team, we're ready and able to support you in your efforts to make a difference in your communities. God's abundant blessings to you, and thank you for this time. I'd like to now turn it over to Ben, and thank you, Ben, for setting this up. I'm very grateful to you and to Dr. Monty.
Kevin, Monty, such amazing words. I don't know about you all, but I feel about inspired enough to go out and take care of what I need to take care of, being my role in this work and thinking through all the different amazing ways. Thanks for all the reactions to the comments being shared. So appreciate you engaging with us. Make sure to drop those questions, anything you'd like to know more about. We'll be sure to be sharing some action items like Kevin outlined in our upcoming, some links that we'll share towards the end of the webinar and in the follow-up to today's webinar. So I just want to say a deep word of thanks and appreciation for the call to make faith something that gets put to work, right, in each of our communities, and specifically gets put to work to address the people in our community who are vulnerable and made vulnerable through human trafficking. So thanks so much for those remarks. Thanks for each of your leadership in these spaces. And so I'm excited now to turn and hear about the leadership that kind of reflects all the amazing things that you just heard in the ways people who are putting this work into practice and can help us see ways that we can get involved too. So first on that list of those leaders is Constance Meredith, who serves as the Executive Program Director for the Dream Institute. The Dream Institute creates safe havens where women can heal, grow, and rebuild their future. So Constance, we're excited to hear about the work you do and the ways in which you're kind of putting faith into action in your community to address these needs and challenges. So Constance, we'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And good morning to everyone. And thank you for the work that each and every single one of you do. As he said, my name is Constance Meredith, and I'm the co-executive director of the Short Creek Dream Center, which is part of a broader network of dream centers serving survivors of human trafficking, religious abuse, and families in crisis across Arizona and Utah. We currently operate 2 Dream Centers. One is in Shiloh, Arizona, where we focus on crisis pregnancy, family stability, and emergency support for women and families in immediate need. Our second Dream Center is in Hilldale, Utah, where we serve survivors of familial trafficking, religious trafficking, and coercive control, many coming from rural and isolated communities. We are also in the process of building a new residential Dream Center in Mount Pleasant, Utah, in partnership with Joyce Meyer Ministries. This facility is being designed specifically for trafficking survivors, including mothers with children and single adults, and reflects everything we have learned about long-term recovery and stability. Now, before I ever led a program, I was a client in a program. I graduated from the Phoenix Dream Center 14 years ago and went on an outreach from 10 p.m. at night until 2 o'clock in the morning, just reaching out to survivors. And I just fell in love with being able to come alongside women and just being there and meeting them where they're at. So I completed that long-term program over a decade ago. And through my experience, I have learned what helps survivors heal, and just as importantly, what causes them to fall through the cracks. At the Dream Center, we serve survivors of sex trafficking, labor trafficking, familial and religious trafficking, and women and mothers in exiting high control coercive environments. Many of the individuals we serve come from rural and isolated communities where access to services is limited and the control is deeply entrenched. Across our locations, we provide safe, confidential residential housing, trauma-informed case management, mental health referrals and support, life skills development and workforce readiness, parenting support and family stability, and legal advocacy and systems navigation. Each Dream Center that we have is tailored to its community, but all are built on the same foundation. We don't treat survivors as cases to manage. We walk with them through a continuum of care built for lived experience and evidence-based practices. They asked us to speak of some of our wins. So some of our biggest wins are not really flashy, but they are definitely life-changing. Survivors obtaining driver's license, IDs, and employment for the first time. Mothers reunifying with their children. Survivors maintaining sobriety, safety, and housing stability. Individuals transitioning off public systems into independent living. A lot of people that are in our community. We have every Dream Center that we have has a church where they go to, and of course, it's not forced for them to be able to go. We meet survivors exactly where they're at, and we are just the hands and feet of Jesus of just being there and showing them that we just love them and we just want to help them through it. A lot of the times, I hear a lot of the survivors that we talk about all the different things that have gone on in life and where we want to go in life. And a lot of the questions come up. I am a pastor's wife. My husband runs one of our churches in one of our small towns. And a lot of them ask me, like, how do you have a relationship with God after everything that's happened to you? And those are usually the conversations that lead to their journey of being able to want to have that relationship with God. And then you just see the transformation and all of the things change in their lives of where they're going because their belief systems have changed. And now they do believe that there is a God, and they do believe that God is there for them. So that's just a huge win, of course, for us. Our outreach has grown by over 400%. And today we serve hundreds of families weekly through residential and community-based programs. Through this growth, we've learned something critical in that the most dangerous time for a survivor is not entry into our program, it's the exit out of our program. So we decided to do something different. We wanted to build a model that looked different. Most programs end support when a survivor leaves residential care. We learned through experience that this gap often determines long-term success or failure. We created a second phase transitional housing program that is physically separate from our main facility, but still deeply connected to the Dream Center. This phase supports survivors who are living independently for the first time, working or in school, parenting while continuing to heal, navigating probation, custody, or legal systems. They have their own space, real-world responsibility, and increasing independence, while still having continued case management and ongoing safety and confidentiality, access to trusted staff, and a supportive community that does not disappear overnight. The bridge prevents survivors from going from fully supported in a program to fully alone without one. Faith is, as I said, is a huge part of who we are, but it is never, ever forced. We are an evangelistic program where we don't require our residents to participate in any faith-based activities. It's always optional and never a condition of services. For survivors who have experienced like religious trafficking or spiritual abuse, we are especially intentional about modeling safe, non-coercive support. I am happy to say that 85 to 90% of our residents end up going to church, end up having a relationship with God, and that is a win all in itself for us. What we're building is not just a program, it's a model that can be replicated and by lived experience. Our second phase housing reduces re-victimization and exploitation, increases housing stability, improves workforce outcomes, decreases long-term dependency on emergency systems, and this aligns with federal goals around survivor self-sufficiency, continuity of care, trauma-informed, survivor-centered systems. I often say that rescue is the beginning and restoration is the work. Through the experience, we have learned that survivors don't need deadlines, they need pathways, they need a community. Trafficking happened in community, and healing also happens in community. At the Dream Center, we are committed to walking with survivors long enough for independence to become sustainable, not just symbolic. So thank you again for your leadership, your partnership, and your commitment to survivors across this country.
Constance, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for those words, both that rescue is the beginning and recovery and rebuilding is such a long-term work. And so we need faith communities to walk alongside. We need individuals to walk alongside individuals rebuilding and in that recovery process, providing that support. And that's that community, right? That harm happens in community, but help also comes in the form of community. Thank you for that beautiful reflection. Thank you for the amazing work you're doing there in Arizona and in Utah and how it's growing. We're excited to hear about that and to think about ways that we can partner and encourage others to be part of this work just like you're doing. So next we're going to hear from Ben Owen. Ben is the founder of We Fight Monsters, who confronts human trafficking and addiction with a lawful, boots-on-the-ground response. I love this mission statement. They rescue, recover, and restore people, turning hotspots of harm into hubs of hope. Ben, tell us what that looks like in practice. What are some of the work you are doing? What brought you to this work? And just share with us a little bit about how that might encourage some of us here in the community, the more than almost 300 people here, or people who are watching online. What does this look like for them to get involved as well?
Well, first off, thank y'all so much for having me. I cannot believe you're putting me up after Constance. That's a hard one to follow. So let me try to take that in order. I've got weaponized ADHD. You guys are going to figure that out while I'm talking. How did I get into this? So honestly, I got into it by accident. You'd have to Google me for the long version, but the short version of my story is I ended up addicted to heroin and homeless on the streets of South Memphis. And my wife and I used to have this foxhole prayer that if God would get us out of hell together, we would spend the rest of our lives coming back for everybody we left behind. And so that's exactly what we did. Who we left behind there in the end was, I mean, honestly, a lot of sex trafficking victims, survivors at this point, and human traffickers, narcotics traffickers like that. That's who we were around in the end, as well as obviously a bunch of addicts. So we got clean in 2019. And in 2021, we started going back to the streets of South Memphis that broke us, trying to get our friends, out of the fire and bring them into the life that we know they can live, the life they should be living. And so what started out as an effort just to get our friends clean has today spiraled into something we never intended to happen. We actually work with a lot of the same law enforcement agencies that have arrested us and all of our friends multiple times, trying to combat the effects of both narcotics and human trafficking on the inner city out there. If you talk to anybody in law enforcement, and we've got, I saw a detective that used to work human trafficking on here, we're never going to arrest our way out of human trafficking, much like we're never going to arrest our way out of the war on drugs. If simply arresting and prosecuting offenders was a solution, this problem wouldn't be happening. What you've got to do, and Constance really hit the nail on the head. It's rescue, it's recovery, and then it's restoration. And that restoration is the big piece that I think gets missed a lot of times. You've got to meet people where they're at, not where we want them to be, not where society says they should be, and not where statistics indicate they ought to be, but literally right where they're at. So what that looks like for us, we're going into the trap houses. We're going to, the dope track, the hot spots for sex and human trafficking. And we're meeting people right where they're at. We're meeting needs. We're building trust in very trust depleted environments, which is, it's kind of easy for us to do that in Memphis because the people on the streets saw us when we were at our absolute rock bottom. So we've already got some implicit trust out there. Gaining the trust of the law enforcement community was a different ballgame. But as of today, we've done that. We've worked operations with Homeland Security Investigations, with Mississippi Bureau of Intelligence, Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics, the West Tennessee Violent Crime and Drug Task Force, Skull Game Solutions, Our Rescue, Shelby County, MPD, the list goes on and on. But these public-private partnerships are really mission critical to making this happen. To date, we've been able to completely shut down 5 fentanyl trafficking operations. And, human trafficking is not like you see it on TV. You don't make entry into a room where it's happening and the girls are like, yay, I'm saved. No, it's, they're often being coerced, using addiction as a tool to keep them imprisoned. So it takes half a dozen to a dozen contacts more often than not before you're able to actually affect a recovery. So we try to shut down the dope supply wherever we can. We've shut down 3 human trafficking operations. I've lost count of the number of arrests, several dozen trafficking recoveries, including minors. We've done this work all over the world, Afghanistan, Ukraine, Haiti, Mexico, Ecuador, but our focus is hands down Memphis, Tennessee, which until very recently was America's most violent city. The work we've been doing, we've been able to stop violent crime entirely on 2 of the worst streets in South Memphis. Human trafficking is no longer a problem out there. In fact, we even took a brothel, tore it to the ground, and turned it into a safe house for women and kids. We've got our second women and kids house about to open. In total, we operate 10 recovery homes for survivors of human trafficking and or addiction. We've got a new commercial building, about 35,000 square feet, that is in South downtown Memphis, that we're about to start seeking funding to renovate into a treatment center and a survivor resource center. Let's see. The list goes on and on of what we're doing, but working with the courts, with law enforcement agencies, and oddly enough, with the streets to affect change out there and what has historically been one of the darkest, most hopeless places in America. That's where the work starts. Human trafficking does not happen in a vacuum, and recovery from human trafficking or addiction does not occur in absence of community. So you've got to build these teams of people that you would never expect to work together. Survivors, people in long-term recovery, ex-cons, vets, social workers, clinicians, community members who grew up in the neighborhoods we serve. That's a very critical piece of it. The composition of the teams matter. We're credible because we've lived this from the inside. None of us came to this work through a policy pipeline. We're completely grassroots funded. We haven't figured out the grant game. But we return to the same streets where we almost died. And when we recover people from those streets, we want to see them restored to be able to go back and do the exact same thing. So what starts with identification and immediate intervention then progresses to, detox, 28-day rehab. Sometimes survivors will need a longer term program. We've had good success getting survivors into 1- and 2-year programs. Sometimes you've got to get them out of the environment. You got to get them all the way out of Memphis, Tennessee. We've got a girl in a 2-year program here in Atlanta now. But what does recovery look like? It's showing up at 2 a.m. It's sitting on the curb in an ER waiting room, not coercing. We're not preaching, or we're not panicking. We're just making sure the person doesn't disappear back into the streets within 24 hours, because that revolving door will indeed keep going. You've got to gain trust, and you've got to just start planting those seeds. And from a faith perspective, obviously we're supposed to be the hands and feet of Jesus. We're supposed to love our neighbor. We're supposed to get out there and like I keep saying, meet people where they're at and try to bring them out of that life that they probably never intended to live. What you run into a lot out here is that the trauma loop has started and is running generationally. We've recovered 3 generations of the same matrilineal line from human trafficking. And we've done the same thing on the addiction side too. This is a pattern that just keeps on repeating until you're able to find a way to interrupt it. And that happens, by connecting, human connection. That's what all of this comes down to, if I'm being honest. Our game plan for the next 3 years is to get another 10 houses. We always want to take what used to be a trap house or a brothel and convert that house into something positive for the street. The net lift that has on the community, aside from just reducing violent crime and trafficking, is, you can't really put it into words. Being able to go on a street where kids did not play outside and then see kids, of all race, creed, and color playing together, throwing basketball, not worrying about getting shot in a drive-by. You don't have, pimps coming in trying to recruit people. That's what it's going to take to restore this nation to what it should be and what it used to be. And I think the more we can get these public-private partnerships, I love that HHS has the Faith Center, and I love that we've got all these NGOs on this call talking about how we're going to address this problem together, because that's what it's going to take. This is not a problem law enforcement can solve by itself. It's not a problem the church can solve by itself. We have to all come together and work. I think Monty said on the beginning of the call, this is about turning, houses of worship into law enforcement. I forget what he said, but that you hit the nail on the head, Dr. Burks. It takes all of us working together. You've got to get creative with these things. We're huge advocates of recovery courts and alternative sentencing programs. That's the only way we're ever going to stop that revolving door of incarceration that honestly just creates more trauma, which feeds the pipeline back into human trafficking and addiction. It's all about showing up. You've got to just be there and be constantly present. Like I said, it takes half a dozen to a dozen points of contact with the average survivor, for us at least, before we see real change happening in that person's life. And that takes a constant presence. They're not gonna just accept services on the spot when you do an op and you encounter somebody. You've got to know what's going on in that person's life, and that takes time getting to know them. And that kind of persistence saves lives. You've got to have infrastructure and volunteers that can scale quickly, and which is where church and faith networks can mobilize in a great way. Housing is a big thing for us. Transportation, childcare, meals, mentors. You can't get somebody out of the fire if they're still worried about how they're going to get their basic needs met, where the next meal is going to come from, how they're going to get a job, how they're going to get clothes for an interview. You've got to be able to address all of these things. And that's one of the places where the church network can come in incredibly handy. Most churches have all of these things available or have a pipeline to get them. And so working with our faith community in Memphis it's been a game changer for us. This is not about forced belief, conditional services, or proselytizing in crisis moments. It's more about loving people, meeting them where they're at. And that's kind of what We Fight Monsters prides ourselves on doing. We try to never, ever come in with any sort of conditional or strings attached. And to that end, we rarely even mention our faith in the first multiple contacts. Nobody's going to know we're there in the name of God unless they ask, which usually does come around. Constance mentioned 85 to 90% of the people they work with end up going to church. I don't know if our numbers are quite that high, but it is a lot higher than I would expect it to be for an organization that doesn't lead faith first, if that makes sense. We're all about recovery first, and then the faith aspect happens after that barrier between the client and God gets removed, which in a lot of cases is addiction, alcoholism, mental health issues. And these are all things that have to be addressed. So having a solid network of community partners is a huge deal. We've probably gotten about 500 people into detox and then 28-day rehab and back into the workforce over the last few years. Not all of those are survivors of human trafficking. When it comes to doing the outreach and recovery, we're background agnostic. You know, I don't care if you're a combat vet or an addicted prostitute. We're trying to get you into the fold there.
Ben, amazing, huge amount of work. You all are doing this work. You're building these partnerships and relationships. You're sticking with people. I was reminded during your talk, you spell relationship, Time, time, right? And it's got to take that re-engagement, that connection, that conversations to build the trust to be able to provide some of these relationships and connections, right? To pull people out of those dark places where they've been and into sources of light and support and connection like you're talking about. And so often, whether or not it's meeting physical needs or spiritual needs, right? So much of that support can come out of houses of worship, partnerships and relationships that can lead to next steps and success for individuals. So thanks so much, Ben. We'll come back around. We're getting some great Q&A, and so I'm excited that we're going to be able to come back around to that. Keep dropping those cute questions into the chat, and I'm excited for Tanya to be able to be here to answer some of those questions that you all might have. And she's going to share her powerful testimony with us today. Tanya is a former member of the U.S. Advisory Council on Human Trafficking. She's held multiple roles in addressing human trafficking in different spaces. She also speaks powerfully as a survivor herself. And she's going to close out today with a call to action for all of us for the ways, because she loves telling everybody how they can be involved, how you all can get involved and connect to this work. So, oh, Tanya, look at all these claps and appreciations, and thanks for you being here. I think you've got a fan club here. We're so excited for you to be here and to help us close out our remarks section with sharing your story and just some encouraging words for all of us to think about ways we can get involved. So Tanya, over to you.
Thank you, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning to some, maybe afternoon to others. It's an honor to gather with all of you, in addition to other leaders who understand that faith isn't meant to, sit quietly in church, right? Faith is designed to move. And scripture gives us a clear operating framework, right? Micah 6:8, where it says, right, what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. So faith without movement becomes symbolism. Faith with movement becomes stewardship, right? So love is not a feeling, it's a practice. And it's something that I often talk about because faith is the belief. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of not seen. So I have faith, right? And love is the behavior which describes my intent when I am being, and action is the evidence that belief is alive. So another thing that I often say, and I'm going to come back to all this and how this makes sense, right? So another truth that we must have courage to name is this: the measure of a society is not how it treats its power, it's powerful or the powerful, but how it protects its vulnerable, right? That's how we can measure a society. How are we treating our most vulnerable? And when we speak about dignity, we're not talking about, charity, because dignity isn't something that we grant, right? But instead, it's something that we recognize, and dignity exists. And dignity exists for me because of my faith, because he is, I am, right? That's enough. And so every person carries dignity before they earn it, right? Before they can lose it, because this is kind of the world we live in, where we're performing and we're looking to earn something and to be something, right? But dignity exists, right? Before anyone can even ever defend it. And this is the thing, when systems forget this, right? That's where we, with faith, where we must remember this. So I am a survivor of human trafficking. And what I want to do, as I was thinking about this, I wanted to just kind of bring to you what it can mean, right? When a person doesn't feel dignified or doesn't feel like they're a part of this society that knows who they are. And I remember being on my hands and knees one time, begging for my trafficker to take me back. He was punishing me for not making quota, and he had me in the rain, on my hands and knees, in a puddle, in front of a bus station in DC, right? And I had to beg for him to keep me, even though I was nothing, I was nobody, I could never be anything. And I felt like inside he didn't even want to be bothered with me because I kept messing up even for him. But see, every night it was my dignity that was for sale. I felt like nothing. I will never forget thinking that even when the people were watching me and him go through this, I'm in the mud puddle and it's raining and people can hear me because I had to scream that I wanted to be with him and that I loved him, had to do all of this. And as I'm screaming it, I saw people looking back at me on my hands and knees in a mud puddle. But instead of people looking concerned, people looked like they were disgusted. And that's how I felt. So this brings me to an issue we must be willing to name with courage, and that is demand. Because when we talk about exploitation, trafficking, abuse, and we often only focus on like the visible harm, right? But the deeper issue is demand. These are things that happen to me. They were projected onto me. And what is truly being, bought and sold is not labor or sex alone. It was for me, it was my dignity. It was the right to choose. It was the theft of my will. I didn't know who I was. I had my dignity was not intact, or my identity wasn't intact. And so mixed with all the other vulnerabilities, not knowing my worth, my identity, right, and not knowing who I was for me my biggest vulnerability. And that touches in some way everyone in our nation and in our world. So demand thrives when dignity is reduced to a commodity and people are treated as products instead of persons. Faith requires us to confront not only the harm, but the hunger it fuels. Right? So let's be clear, right? Human trafficking exists because the demand continues to increase. There's money to be made, and traffickers are on top of this. They're organized, they're in front of this. Now, the questions we need to ask ourselves in this community, the beloved community in our nation, right? We need to ask why? Why is this happening? Who is this happening to, and who is doing this, right? And how? Love, and when I ask myself those questions, to me that causes this movement, this faith to be in action. Love expressed through action becomes transformation. Scripture is unambiguous when it says faith without works is dead. So if we have faith, the right kind of faith, then we have love, and love is action. And so when we speak of greater works, for me, I'm thinking, could this be greater works? So here's just a call of action for those who are listening. Let faith inform policy. The faith that I'm talking about right here and right now, the one that causes move to action, the faith that asks the questions, deeper questions, because how can we love, right, through policy, right? How can we show that? How can we like make action through policy? Let dignity guide decision-making, and let love shape how we address demand. And let's design systems that assume people are worth the investment towards liberty and prosperity, right? Research effects of pornography and create action plans within your own home and your own communities and those who you influence. Understand that there are other gateways that allow for human trafficking to thrive. And use your voice to name demand courageously. We want to continue to support survivors of human trafficking. That is beautiful and that's great. And, we are so thankful, and it is loving and generous. But let's move that even further, and let's begin to talk about the who, what, how, and why. And then let's use your influence to protect the dignity of all. Use your leadership to ensure that families are strengthened and that no person's autonomy is treated as collateral damage. And at your best, courage. And I mean that. Thank you for all of you who think and who believe in, and it is true, it does take courage to talk about something that could be so shameful, right? But I'm asking you to have courage to call out the things that are unacceptable. And when this courage, when anchored in faith and expressed through love, may this always move you to act. Thank you for your time.
Tanya, you're taking me back to my DC talk days, and love is a verb, right? Like all of this work, right? It's love is not talk. Love has to put hands and feet on this work and calls us to hard conversations, questions, calls us to courage, calls us to move and to engage and to be involved in these spaces. So thank you so much for those words, for that encouragement. My office was through in the walls hearing me go, yeah, yeah, yeah. So thank you so much. We're echoing, and then people on the call on the chat are echoing that as well, saying thank you for your courage, thank you for your words and your encouragement. Let me invite Constance and Monty to come on camera too, so we'll have everybody back here again to wrap up the end of this conversation. So appreciate everybody being here with us. Let me start with a question that I was really moved by. We have lots of people, faith and community-based organizations, nonprofits, who are joining today who might not know some initial warning signs of what it might look like for someone who's being trafficked. So Kevin, let me start with you. Let me point that question to you first to help people identify some key warning signs. And then also like just what I know there are hand signals and cards that can be handed out. Can we talk a little bit about that so people know about some of those resources that they can make available as well? Kevin?
Yes, thank you, Ben. Tanya, thank you. That was great. I appreciated hearing from you. She's an amazing lady of God. And thank you, Ben. Are you familiar with Transformation Garden in Tupelo? Are you familiar?
That sounds familiar.
Okay, I was just curious. I met them. I was meeting with A.G. Fitch a couple months ago, and they were with her over at a function I was at. But anyway, identifying factors. I think we can all, and I would ask Tanya and Constance to add as well, and Ben, everybody. I think what some folks I think are looking for is just something that doesn't. I mean, it's common sense in some ways. You see a man with a younger girl, and there's something odd or off about it. They just don't look like they go together. That's not always the case, but that could be an initial identification process. A part of the process is seeing that. I think seeing whoever the young person is. You know, I was blessed to have a trafficking boy safe home in Florida for 4 years. So I want everybody on this call, and I think most people on this call do know this, that according to the DOJ, 30% of all American kids being trafficked are little boys, you know, minor boys. So, but I would say in regards to that, Ben, is that kids, that young people that look down, they don't make eye contact. They maybe have particular sorts of tattoos indicating they're a property of someone. I would ask that Tanya, you can fill in some of the blanks. I know there's a lot of them. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very concerning question. And you know, for me, it's, you know, detachment, right? Kids who are, or they just don't feel like they belong, and they don't feel like they're a part of society, and they are withdrawn, right? And so, you know, it can be funny because, and this is why it's important to look into your own home, right? And what's happening inside your home and in your communities, those are your influence, because, you know, some kids may be quiet with their family members, but then, you know, they're with their you know, those who are trafficking them. And because of performance, you know, how they have to perform, they seem happy. But some things you can see is they have multiple phones, or, you know, maybe they're just different. If you know this kid, right? If you or someone that you may know, you know, perhaps they're starting to dress a little different, or, you know, or perhaps they used to be nice and calm, and now they're like obnoxious, right? Easily triggered. And you're like, what did I do? I didn't say anything, you know? So some of those signs are like really subtle. And unfortunately, when you get there, it's many times it's too late, right? And that's a hard part, right? So yeah, I kind of stop there and see if Constance, you know, or Ben, if you kind of have anything else.
Constance, you want to go or you want me to?
You go first.
So those are all great things to look for. In the adult victim range, look for things like people, control's a big one. If you see a dude with multiple females or even just one female and he's taking like very serious control of her identification, her money, that's off. Pay attention to things like that. Especially in airports, if somebody else is controlling a female's ID or a boy's ID, and it's clear that they aren't the child of the person controlling that identification, that's a big red flag. I would also suggest Googling Homeland Security Investigations Blue Campaign. They've got a ton of great info out there. I would like to touch on what's not a sign of human trafficking, because I see these posts go viral all the time and it drives me insane. Zip ties on car doors and like markers on tire, dude, that's not real. Okay. Stop perpetuating that nonsense. Like putting a mark on a car window, none of that's real. Human trafficking in America does not look like somebody going and kidnapping kids by doping them up in a dressing room at a store. Do those things happen? Yeah, probably. I've never encountered it ever. And we have worked in third world countries. So pay attention to when something just feels off. But controlling money, controlling identification, those are giant red flags. And again, Homeland Security Investigations Blue Campaign has a ton of good information, as well as hotline numbers you can reach out to if you see something that just doesn't add up.
Yeah, I would
Thanks.
definitely second that. I would say absolutely go to the Blue Campaign. The important thing to know is that no single indicator confirms trafficking. It's patterns and combinations that really matter to be able to see that there's human trafficking. It's not just like one single indicator. There are definitely key warning signs, but the Blue Campaign does a great job by being able to, I think they even have a guide of warning signs and things to look out for. But the most important thing is, like if you see something, report it. They're the ones who are going to be able to find out whether or not it's trafficking or it's not trafficking. See something, say something is what we always usually go by. All you're doing is making a report, and it's up to them to investigate to find out if there's truth behind it.
Constance, Ben, Kevin, Tanya, thank you so much for that. Here's another question that came in. What we know, we have the Office of Trafficking in Persons website. We just put the Blue Campaign in the chat. We also put the Human Trafficking Hotline website in the thing. So we have some of those national level resources, but what are some of the resources you all use in the local community? Both online and person resources. Like, so somebody who wants to get more and learn more about what's going on in their community, like what website should they go to? What office should they look for that can give them more information in their local community about what human trafficking looks like for them in that community? Ben, I see you off mute, so I'm going to go first there.
I always tell people to reach out to their local recovery courts first. Most drug court programs, and so for people that don't know, a recovery court is like alternative sentencing. Somebody gets in trouble, there's an underlying cause, and they try to address that rather than lock them up, because the revolving door of incarceration rarely makes anything better. So a lot of drug court programs actually started out as what they called prostitution courts. And so the staff in those courtrooms are almost invariably going to be able to connect you with your local service providers. Child advocacy centers are a great place to ask to volunteer. Salvation Army usually is going to end up knowing the players. If you have a physical Salvation Army location in your geography. Smaller towns, you're probably not going to have these resources like I'm describing. Just get with your local police department. Go to City Hall and just ask around, like, what are the options around here? Because I don't care how small your town is, you've got this happening in your backyard. I guarantee it. Trying to get involved with a counter trafficking organization, that's usually tricky if you have no idea what's going on. So, get up to speed first and then try to become a volunteer somewhere. And I want to add in that counter trafficking is not running around kicking doors and saving babies all the time. There's a lot more to it than that.
Awesome. Tanya, go ahead.
Yeah, all the things that been said. And what I want to reiterate is that we're talking about faith and faith communities. And so one of the things that you all can do because of your faith and because you want to put it into action is to understand what exactly is going on in your community, right? You know, call your DA or C or Commonwealth attorney, and ask, how are we leading and guiding human trafficking? I'm not seeing any commercials. How, the saying that goes, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? So if you make it a problem in your community, then they're going to start seeking solutions. And so that's what, I've been doing on a local level is just, raising my voice and saying, where are we coordinated? How are we aligned? What are we doing? Why are kids are in detention center that have been picked up for prostitution? Doesn't make sense to me, right? So that is love in action in having the courage that we're talking about. So everything been said, I just want to push that even more. This is how however many people are here on this call, if every one of you called your locality and started asking these deeper questions, we'll start seeing the needle move a little bit more.
Awesome. Constance, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, sure. So also being able to find out if there is a task force that's in your community or in your state. I was on the governor's and mayor's task force in Arizona. I'm now on the Utah task force. And so finding out if there is a task force, and most of those task force put together all the different service providers and different like awareness organizations and things along that nature. And they also do a lot of a vetting process, which is really cool. So that that the people that you're trying to engage with or trying to find out that there was a vetting process that was in there. I know the National Human Trafficking Hotline, if they're partnered with them, they're a great resource. And then they also vet all of their people that they send people to. So those are just great resources just to be able to find out. And if you're wanting to know, like locally, I do live in small towns. All of our dream centers are in small towns. And so getting involved on the state level or the governor's level or the AG's level, anything along those lines is always going to be golden for you, because that's where you're going to find out what's going on, the movers, the shakers, the policies, the things that are going on in your community that you really want to find out and find out where you're at. So we're not always just like guessing and thinking outside of the box, like, oh, this is happening. And then you're like, no, that's really not happening. Get to know the facts. Don't just believe what you see on social media. Don't believe all of those things. Get to your local government, your local entities, finding out what's really going on, the policies that are written, the Senate bills, the House bills, all of those things around human trafficking, and the local resources that have been vetted by somebody.
Thanks, Constance. You're making me think of the power of the question, like, how can I help? Going to some of these places and saying, what would it mean? What would it look like for me to step alongside and come alongside this work that you're doing and be a powerful supporter of the work in local communities, in the task force and law enforcement, all those things? How can I help? Is such a powerful question. Kevin, before I come to Monty, let me come to you. Any questions, thoughts, things that you want to make sure everybody's reminded of here at the end of our call today?
I would say, yes, if there's any further questions, you can call the hotline. It's the Compass. It's the national hotline. They're now based out of San Antonio, Texas. You can go there for resources. Also, a lot of people on this call might be familiar with Ashley Chapman and Atlas. They have engaged together. They're in 16 states. They know where all the resources, and they're growing. That would be another. And then you can contact OTIP, the Office of Trafficking Persons here at HHS ACF, and we can help guide you and point you in the right direction. So resources are out there, and help is out there. Just make some calls, and as everyone has said, if you care and take action, some people will come and support you and help you with your fight, with your cause.
Monty, anything to add to those amazing words from Kevin?
Absolutely. Just really quick, I would encourage everyone here to, if you want to be a part of this type of work, reach out to one of these panelists, one of their organizations, for context and for content, so you can understand exactly what you're dealing with and what your role may be. You don't have to build a plane. You may just be part of advocating for someone that needs help. And I think that our panelists spoke so eloquently and so professional that we may think one thing and not really see what's really happening. But there are people that have been on the ground, like Constance said, and like Tanya said, and like Ben said, they've been on the ground doing this for a long time. those subtle nuances that we might not recognize. Kevin said it. Just because you don't understand it doesn't mean you shouldn't say something. If it feels off, say something. And I'm just thankful for such an amazing discussion. And I'll turn it back over to Ben.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Monty. And thank our amazing panelists today for the amazing work they're doing in each of these spaces and communities and helping us catch a vision of what's possible. And we've seen it through the chat. People catch a vision of what's possible, how they can be involved in their respective areas of work. So let me mention a few resources and tools. We also at the HHS Center want to be a resource and a connection point. So you can email us at faith@hhs.gov. You can get to our website at hhs.gov/faith. We can get you more information, resources. If you haven't seen your question answered today, send it to us in an email. We'll try and make sure our follow-up addresses as many of those questions as possible with links and ways in which you can be connected. One of those ways is the Office of Trafficking in Persons National Human Trafficking Prevention Hotline Toolkit for engagement and connection. And you can see some of those resources and tools on that website. We've even used them. Our webinar title reflects the great work that's being done through that toolkit and any number of other resources and strategies available through those websites and others for building out these strategies and efforts. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be part of this conversation and for thinking of ways you can put hands and feet, put this work into action, put the dignity into action, put love into action in your community for making a difference for so many people who are affected by these issues. We thank you for joining us today and have an amazing rest of your day.